Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia here with Diante Lee and Steven Ruiz. Good to have you watching on FanDuel TV or listening on Spotify. We are going to recap all the action. And Diante, you just reminded me before we came on that they say the season doesn't start till after Thanksgiving for the teams. For the players, that's for podcasters as well. We're ready to go now, finally.
1,000%. And I'm also trying to show some solidarity with my East Coast co-host by doing a little performative coldness with the Columbia jacket. I've got my apple cider here to enjoy as we're podcasting as well. So coming off of the Sunday Night Football game, I'm trying to show, at least a little bit of alignment with what you guys are going through.
He's appropriating culture.
I would never experience this over
in his
here.
65-degree weather. He's over there and is bundled up and drinking hot beverages.
There you go.
Be insulted.
Diante's in San Diego, jacket on, drinking hot cider. Ruiz and I are on the East Coast. But you know what? I like the chill in the air because it means we are getting to the stretch run of football season. The playoff picture is clearing up a little bit. The contenders, the pretenders, all that stuff. We're going to get to all of it. But you know how we start the show. Every week we go through lessons. What did we learn this week? It's week 13. Steven Ruiz, you are up first. What did you learn?
All right, we're going to have a conversation about Justin Tucker. I know the Ravens don't want to have it. I know John Harbaugh is saying it wouldn't be wise to move on from Justin Tucker, but he missed 2 kicks in this game, 2 field goals in this game. He missed an extra point in a game that ends up being decided by 5. I think the score is a little deceiving there. It was garbage time when the Ravens cut it down to a 5-point lead, but that's Tucker's 8th missed field goal on the season. That's more than he's missed in any other season going back to his rookie year. And he's cost the Ravens 61% in terms of win probability over the season. He cost them 28% of win probability in this game alone. And for a team that we've seen start to show cracks on the offensive side, I still think this is the best offense in the league. I think Lamar Jackson has been the best quarterback in the league this year, although Josh Allen is threatening him for that title. But we've also seen cracks on the defensive side. I don't know if this team has the margin for error to survive a kicking performance this bad. And it's not like Justin Tucker has gone from the best kicker of all time to a mediocre or slightly above average kicker. He is like the worst kicker in the NFL right now. He's missed more kicks than anybody in the NFL. And then going back to last year, he's 1 for 5 from 50 yards out. So the signs were there. I think there are signs that he is regressing, and I don't think we can chalk this up to a rough patch that the Ravens are going to get over and that Tucker's going to get over. This is a serious problem.
Here's what Ravens fans might not want to say out loud right now, admit right now. I agree with you, Ruiz, but this game, this loss to the Eagles, this felt like their playoff losses of seasons past in a way. Where, you're going, well, wait, how are we losing this game? We're moving the ball. Wait, missed field goal, drop. All of a sudden, you're giving up a 25-yard touchdown run. Not to say they outplayed the Eagles, to your point, by the time it got to the end. But for most of this game, for 3/4 of this game, it was that type of game. And it's like the things they've been able to count on in years past in the regular season where they say, we've got this going into the playoffs. And then they play a playoff game and we all look up and go, wait, I thought they had that. They didn't have that in this game. And that's kind of what this loss felt like to me. And, they don't have breathing room for these losses anymore. They've had bad losses this season. They've got to win these games. And now all of a sudden they feel unsettled for all the reasons you pointed out. Part of it is their offense has not looked nearly as good the past few weeks. Their defense has looked a little bit better, but you don't trust that as like a dominant, side of the football. And now you're throwing in this Justin Tucker thing, the thing they've been able to count on for the most part for so many years here. And just a couple more numbers to add to what you said there, Ruiz. From 50 plus, he is 44% on the season. The rest of the NFL is 72%. He is 63% from 40 to 49 yards. The rest of the NFL is 75%. So when he attempts a field goal of 40 yards or more, it's almost a coin flip. He's 53% on those this year. And like you said, they're a very good team. I think we all believe they're a Super Bowl contender, but they're not like a juggernaut. Like they're not going to go into the playoffs as the favorite. They might have to go on the road in the playoffs. And so you can't have this added to your team at this point. And it's not just right now, it's going on all season. Diante, but I don't know what the fix is. Is there a fix, or is this something they just have to live with?
I mean, if you were going to address this and admit that this was a problem, the time to do it would have been after the loss to the Browns, where I think they had an opportunity to tie it late in that game. Justin Tucker misses a field goal. The Browns go, or they maybe would have extended the lead. The Browns go down, take the lead, win that football game, right? I think that would have been kind of like a boiling point if you were going to identify one and say it's entirely possible that this season is going to hinge on the leg of a guy who is showing classic signs of regression, if not falling off the cliff outright. I think that to keep him now, you look up, you've got a month left in the season. What are the answers? You know, there really aren't many left, which leaves them, I think, in probably as precarious a position you can be in. And Sheil, I love the way that you teed that up, talking about their playoff losses in the past, because you watch in the first half and it's like, okay, they're connecting with Zay Flowers. You know, they're not necessarily popping big explosive runs, but you can see Derrick Henry's pretty effective as a hammer trying to keep them on schedule. Lamar Jackson is able to extend. Obviously, you get that incredible touchdown pass to Mark Andrews where he snatches it out the sky after Lamar extends. And that was preceded by another play where he rolls out to his left, buys some time, throws the ball deep, and connects with the Rashad Bateman, I think. And you're thinking, all right, this is the Ravens offense we've been watching when it's at its best. It's a machine. Even when things seem like it's going wrong for them, they always have number 8 to be able to, you know, solve problems for them. And they were playing extremely well defensively to start this game. And then you just look at the way that the margin for error just shrinks on this team because it beats itself. And this week it was in the kicking game. It was in the special teams game. And I think that when you're talking about how they play against contenders, which is really all that matters for this team for the rest of the season, who's to say that they're not going to cost themselves a game against the Texans, a team that they should be able to dominate wire to wire based on how the two teams are playing, because something goes wrong in a special teams game, or this team has another bad penalty outing. And that has just been the story of this season for this team. And we've continued to try to give them credit for being as talented as they are and trying to solve some of their problems on the fly. But similar to how we've talked about the Chiefs, there just comes a certain point where you have to acknowledge the fact that this team is going to cause itself its own problems, and the kind of problems they cause themselves could very well be the season-ending variety.
Yeah, it really could. I mean, you like you said, we're 13 weeks in now, and how many times are we going to have these types of like their A game? There's no doubt their A game. They can beat any team in the NFL, but it feels more unset. You know, right now is when you kind of want to be peaking or have an upward, trajectory, and right now they feel as unsettled as ever. I mean, I mentioned the offensive stuff. Their 2 worst offensive performances based on success rate have come in the last 3 weeks. I thought today Lamar Jackson had to put the cape on way too many times. We've had this conversation, I feel like 100 times this season, where the best version of this Ravens offense is when, hey, they're doing a lot of stuff in structure. Todd Monken's scheme is working. But if Lamar Jackson needs to, be creative, he can do that. A lot of today, I thought, was Lamar Jackson needing to be creative. The scheme was not necessarily working for him today. You have that. You have safety Marcus Williams was a healthy scratch today. Diante Johnson, who they traded for, did not get in the football game. And now you have the Tucker thing. So I don't know, Ruiz, what is your sort of state of the Ravens at this point in the season? Am I painting too bleak of a picture, or do you have some concerns?
No, I do have concerns. Like, I'm not as confident that this team is going to reach the AFC title game as I was if you asked me 2 weeks ago. And I think this game was the first time that we really saw Lamar try to put on the cape and struggle to do so too. I mean, it was still a positive day for him overall. Like, I think he finished with a positive EPA. He's only finished with a negative EPA like twice this whole season, or maybe even one time this whole season. But I thought this performance for the offense was about negative plays and their inability to avoid them. Even Lamar Jackson, who we've been talking about, he just doesn't get sacked this year. He was sacked 3 times this year. It was the second highest sack rate of the season. And it just seemed like the Eagles' rush plan wasn't necessarily to like collapse the pocket and get those quick sacks. It was to keep them caged inside the pocket and just tighten it, not give them those exit lanes. And I thought they did a better job than any other defense I've seen this year in terms of keeping him in the pocket and not letting him turn into a scrambler. I mean, he's inevitable. He's going to get outside of the pocket. He's going to make plays. But even the plays he made, they weren't like the plays you're used to seeing with Lamar, where he does all the hard work, the difficult work before he lets go of the ball. These plays, he had to escape for his life, and then he's still throwing 50-50 balls to Mark Andrews, who's making an amazing catch over defenders. Nothing was easy about this game. And I think the more we see that, the more the cracks are going to show up, the more we're going to realize that this receiving core still isn't where it needs to be if this team's going to win a Super Bowl or win a Super Bowl convincingly. I still think they have the talent on the roster. The defense did look better, and I think that's the silver lining you could take away from this game is this defense defense is starting to shore up some of those mistakes we've been harping on all season. We didn't see really an explosive play downfield too often. We saw A.J. Brown kind of break a tackle and create an explosive play, but it wasn't the coverage bust we're used to seeing. So I do think there's something positive to take away from this, but we saw the floor of this offense, and I think the floor is a little lower than we realized coming into this week.
Yeah. You know what? I think that to Steven's point, one of my favorite shots from the production crew was a 4th and 8 that they ended up not converting that effectively ended the game. And you saw Tony Romo kind of note just what the zone shell looked like on the back end before Tristan McCollum got his hands on that pass to break it up and ultimately finish the game for the Eagles on defense. And that's what I think the success was for Vic Fangio and the defense on that end. And I think that that's what painted the problems for the Ravens offense. This is not necessarily the way that they lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game where guys couldn't separate from tight coverage. This was more so Vic Fangio, I think, trusting that, hey, our guys have a good enough understanding of where these routes are going to be breaking, that if we're in the windows, these are not guys who are going to make those tier 1 plays over the top of our defenders. They're not going to win at the catch point more often than we will. And I thought that that's what played out. I thought that, again, in the first quarter, when Lamar was playing at his best and he was, able to extend and push the ball downfield, and we saw more coverage breakdowns from Philadelphia, that to me ended up being more of the outlier on a down-to-down basis. And that's not necessarily what I expected based on the way that this game started. And this is all to give credit to the Eagles before we even interface with what they did in the second half with Saquon Barkley in the run game. And that was ultimately what ended up being the back-breaking factor in this game.
Yeah, no, it's well said. Let's take a break. We come back, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the Eagles side of this game because this was one of the biggest games of the season. What did we learn about that football team? All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Diante just touched on some of it. My lesson for Week 13, and I didn't think I'd be here, trust me, is that the Eagles are right there with any Super Bowl contender in the NFL, in my opinion, in this weird season where I don't think there's that one team or those two teams that I'm like, no, they're getting there unless something goes horribly wrong. I think they're right there in that top tier with everyone else. And Diante was talking about that Eagles defense. And that's where it starts for me. And I again, this is not something I thought was even in the range of possibilities when we went into the season. They have one of the best defenses, maybe the best defense in the NFL right now. They did not completely shut down that Ravens offense. No one's going to do that. But when you look at what guys like Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Zach Bond in this game, and how Vic Fangio has played to everyone's strengths. I mean, these are two rookies I just mentioned. There's a guy, Zach Bond, they signed from the New Orleans Saints for a low-level contract, and he's been one of their best players all season long. So defensively, I feel like if you're able to do what they were able to do to the Ravens today, your defense is going to keep you in almost every game. And then the formula for this team, we've talked about it before. Well, what if they get in a game where they got to lean on their drop-back passing game? And it's like, it's hard for me to even imagine, like, how do they get into that type of game? You know what I mean? Because they get down early in this game, and they can be down like 17-3 in the third quarter, and they don't need to stop running the football at that point. So unless it's a situation where it's like the last 4 minutes of a game and you need 2 scores, other than that, they can kind of play their style of play, and their offensive line is their star. They're able to outlast every other team. Saquon Barkley has more rushing yards in the fourth quarter than any other team in the NFL. So they're just really well positioned right now. It's different than what we talked about with the Ravens, where it feels like the Eagles have found their identity after a very shaky first 5 weeks of the season. They're relatively healthy. They want to run the football. They want to lean on their offensive line, and their defense, again, is one of the best in the NFL. So Diante, I'm putting them right there with any team as a Super Bowl contender right now.
I'm with you 100%. And, I know that you're not the Eagles fan that I am, right? Like, but this was probably the first time really watching this game. I would say maybe some of Sunday night last week played into this as well, where I kind of had like a sinking feeling of like, oh man, they're going to kind of force me to believe that this team can go win a Super Bowl. It's much more comfortable as a fan when you think like, we'll be good. And maybe we land there, you might fall backwards into a Super Bowl. This team looks very, very similar, maybe not the same play style wise, but it feels very similar to what it was in the back half of the 2022 season, where you look up and you say, oh, this team's got a recipe. teams cannot knock them off of playing the game that they want to play. And they were able to come out in the second half and just dictate the terms at the line of scrimmage in a way that I didn't think they'd be able to do against the Ravens defensive front that's been able to control the run game against most of the teams they played. And then on the other side of the ball, and we talked about this when we were focusing on the Ravens, I thought that they did a great job of just being disciplined in their rush lanes. They didn't do what Cincinnati did earlier this year, where it was like, we're just throwing everything against the wall and just hoping that the Ravens make a mistake. It wasn't, making high risk, high reward types of exchanges in terms of play calls. I think that in the first half, they kind of realized what the Ravens were trying to do to dictate personnel. They made some adjustments in their play calling. I thought Vic Fangio did a great job of making sure that Cooper DeJean was on the field and near the ball. And that's the best way that they play. And they were able to take away a lot of running lanes and passing windows because they have these guys that have great, change of direction ability and are good, open field tacklers. And they made sure those guys were in position to make those plays. And they did. So just from a top to bottom, in terms of all the things that we were maybe complaining about the Eagles not doing well in the beginning of the season, in terms of managing game situations, in terms of executing in high leverage situations, this team is 100% that. That's how they're winning games now. And I think that change and that improvement over the last, 5 or 6 weeks is a big reason why I'm such a believer in this team right now.
I think I'm also there, but I'm also only there because of conference alignment. I think if they were in the AFC, I would trust them to win 3 straight games where this drop back passing game is that much of a concern. Like, they started moving the ball because they started running a college offense in the second quarter. We're just going to call RPOs. We're going to call drag routes against man coverage. You're at a certain point, a team is going to make you drop back and pass the football. Now, in the NFC, every other contender has a similar issue going on. Like, we've seen Detroit kind of struggle when they have to play left-handed. They can't play on the front foot. And, of course, Minnesota is going to be that situation is going to be precarious for them with Sam Darnold, who was itching to throw an interception in this game again, but managed not to against Arizona. So there are questions that are just as strong for every other NFC contender that you could apply to Philly, but none of them have a defense that I've seen do this to a top-level opponent yet. And that has to make them the number one team in the NFC right now, in my opinion. And I think that some of their strengths on offense are a little more reliable just because you have Saquon Barkley as an outlet, as a runner, as a pass catcher. And like Sheil said, like, even when you fall behind in the game script, it doesn't matter. It kind of reminds me of those like early Legion of Boom Seattle teams, like that comeback against the Packers. And I think it was the 2014 NFC Championship game. That was on the back of Marshawn Lynch. Like, they were down by 3 scores and they just kept running the football and kept getting explosives on the ground. And then they eventually get back in that game. I feel like the Eagles have a similar setup with their defense. I don't think it's quite the Legion of Boom defense, but it's like Sheil said, it might be the best in the NFL right now. And this run game is amazing. We haven't really seen something quite like it in terms of down-to-down stability, plus that potential for explosives on any time Barkley gets the ball.
Yeah, it's they had 112 yards net passing today in the year 2024. I looked up, I'm like, how many teams have won a game this year with such few passing yards? There's been 9 examples of it in the NFL this season, and 2 are by the Eagles. So it's you're right. I mean, the RPOs, and that's something that hasn't worked for them all season long. And this was like a step in the right direction with those. In the second quarter, Ravens were playing a lot of zone coverage, and they were hitting them with the RPOs. And then it's just like you run it, and it just feels like a matter of time. I think we talked about that on our preview show where it was like, which defense is going to be able to last in the fourth quarter to not allow the opposing running back to break off that big run. And it ended up being the Eagles defense was able to do that. And the Ravens all of a sudden give up that 70-yard scoring drive to the Eagles. And that ends up being the difference in the game. So they're in a good spot right now. They're going to be no worse than the 2 seed in the NFC unless they have a complete meltdown. Because you look at the NFC South and the NFC West, they've got like a 3-game lead over those divisions. And of course, they've got the lead over the Commanders here. So it really looks like right now, a lot of things can change. But right now, it's going to be them, and then whoever wins the NFC North, whether that's the Lions or someone else. And their remaining schedule, I mean, they finished the season with the Giants and the Cowboys the last 2 weeks. They've still got the Panthers on the schedule. So anything can happen. Panthers fans, don't get mad. I know, much more competitive team than you were a month ago, but Eagles are 12.5-point favorites in that game next week. And then you look at the Lions schedule, and it's a lot tougher than what the Eagles have left here. So we'll see. This is a week-to-week league, as we're learning with these conversations about the Ravens and the Eagles, but they've got to be thrilled with getting these victories back-to-back weeks. You go to Los Angeles, you beat the Rams, and then you go to Baltimore, you beat the Ravens, and now you get the easier part of your schedule, and you've won 8 in a row. All right, we take a break. We come back. We learn what Diante learned. What lesson did Diante learn in week 13? All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Diante, you're up. What lesson did you learn in week 13?
Is that Kansas City better go undefeated the rest of the way, because if they give home field advantage to the Bills are walking to the Super Bowl. Right now, they look like the best team in the NFL to me. Like, I look at, and obviously, San Francisco's dealing with injury problems. They're kind of limping towards the finish line in a lot of ways, and I think that we'll get to some of the recent updates with some of the injury issues that they're having. But I think that when I was watching the Sunday Night Football game, I had this thought that there are identity wins, right, where a team just kind of plays to what they want to do, and you get to see them, kind of manifest all the play calls, the scheme, the use of personnel. And then to me, there are institutional wins where you can feel from a top-down level that this is what the team was built to do, and they can do it against anybody. And the Bills have done that in their high-profile games of late. Basically, after those losses to Houston and Baltimore, this has just been a team that's leaned on exactly what they've been trying to build this team out to be, and it's been successful. You look at what they did on the ground in the ground game, almost 4.5 yards after contact per rush, season best from them. They averaged 7.5 yards per carry this week. They've been one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. I mean, James Cook averaged 7.5 yards per carry. As a team, they averaged 5.8, so just under 6. I thought that for them, winning at the line of scrimmage and basically just taking the heart out of San Francisco's defense, which has struggled to stop the run all year, but clearly was hapless. Whether the weather conditions were ideal or not, there was nothing that San Francisco was going to do to win at the line of scrimmage. And when they're able to play that kind of football game where all Josh Allen has to do is extend every handful of dropbacks to be able to find a Dalton Kincaid or find a Khalil Shakir, and you're able to get those shallow crosses and those over routes running into a bunch of voids in coverage because these teams have to crowd the line of scrimmage to stop the run game. I don't know how you stop a team that's as balanced as Buffalo is right now. And they didn't have to lean on the return of Matt Milano to play well defensively in the way that we talked about in the preview show earlier this week. So to me, I think that in terms of checking boxes, I don't know if any team is playing to peak capacity at the level that Buffalo has been lately, especially relative to competition level. And right now, to me, I don't know how anybody in the AFC can feel like they can go to Highmark Stadium and beat that team if they had to in a playoff environment.
I mean, if I'm Baltimore, I'm still kind of confident I can do it. I still haven't seen Buffalo tackle Derrick Henry in like 5 years. So like that would be the one thing I would cling on to. And I still don't trust the defense. I don't trust the defense against a good quarterback in the playoffs. I need to see it. And I still don't trust the offense it has been a couple of months now that we've seen this team kind of be forced to play in a certain role. And we've seen Josh Allen get forced into hero mode, but I still think that's in this team. And I mean, but you could say that you could point out a flaw with every contender in this league, and not every team has a quarterback that's playing at this level. I think Josh Allen just gives them immunity to like any style of game. They can fit into any style of game. I mean, what did he do tonight? He averaged over 8 yards per drop back in this slot that they played in. Brock Purdy could barely throw the ball at times in this. And Josh Allen didn't seem bothered at all. He was one of his best games in terms of like efficiency, offensive efficiency. He only had 18 dropbacks, but he didn't need that many dropbacks with the way the game was going. He's just an amazing player. And I mean, I've been Team Lamar for MVP all season long, but these are the types of games where you start to rethink that.
All right, Ruiz. So I feel like we do this exercise. I don't know if it's every week, every few weeks. One team out of the AFC to get to the Super Bowl. You have to choose right now. Who do you got?
I mean, I almost have to pick Buffalo by default.
You don't have to.
I'm sticking with the Ravens. I'm going.
All right, yeah. The recency bias. If you feel it's the Ravens, it's the Ravens.
I just can't get that game out of my mind from September. And I know it's from September, and these teams are going to be totally different by the time January rolls around. But Derrick Henry won't be different, and he will still be there. Number 8 will still be there, and they'll still have to reckon with that two-headed monster in the backfield. And I don't think, like, even as good as Buffalo's defense has looked, and it's looked a lot better than I thought it would with this, like, no-name roster, especially on the back end, I don't think it's suited to stopping that style of run game.
Diante, are you Bills?
I'm Bill. I feel like the last 3 times we've done this, I've been on both.
Last time you definitely had
Buffalo.
the Bills, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sticking with it. Like I said, I mean, the defense to me is just clearing the bar of what it has to be. I would not say that its ceiling is as high as what even Baltimore's can be at its best, right? When they have Kyle Hamilton playing at his best, when Nate Wiggins is playing well on the perimeter, I do think that they just have a level of playmaking on the Ravens defense that the Bills can't match. But I do feel like in terms of just having solid role players everywhere along this defensive front and on the back seven, I think that makes it so much easier on a guy like Von Miller, who was taking a step back from being the dominating force he was a few years ago. But now if he only has to have 5 or 6 quality pass rush reps a game instead of 20 to 25, that's a winning formula for them because they're getting enough from the rest of this defense. Terrell Bernard has been great in Matt Milano's absence, and I'm interested to see how much better Matt Milano can be almost as a force multiplier in terms of their middle of field defense. And I do think that that's going to be necessary, right? I do think that you can get after these safeties. Taylor Rapp has been susceptible to giving up plays downfield, not always the best tackler. DeMar Hamlin can be a bit of a gambler in coverage. He's not always in the right spot, and he's not necessarily a playmaker or, one of the rangy middle of field players. So there are still ways, I think, to take advantage of this team. I just think that the defense reaches the baseline it needs to for what this offense is doing to give them as many bites at the apple as possible to beat most teams in the NFL. And I think that that's just what's been manifested on Sundays over the last few weeks.
All right. In the past, when we've done this exercise, I've made sure we're safe and have one person still saying, settle down. By the time we get to January, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs will be the team. However,
come on.
Like everybody else, I watched that game on Black Friday, and I cannot do it anymore.
No,
I cannot hold the mantle for the Kansas City Chiefs. Since 2000, there have been 23 teams who have had 11 wins at this point in the season. None have had a worse point differential than the 2024 Chiefs. They are plus 54 on the season, and yet they are 11-1. I am they can't keep we are all they can't keep getting away with this meme. Maybe they'll figure it out, but I'm coming over to Diante's side. I feel like if I had to pick right now and put, my favorite hat on the line here, I'm going with the Buffalo Bills. I just think they can win different types of games. I hear what you're saying, Ruiz. Ravens took it to them. That was such a rare occurrence to this Bills team. And so I understand it could be matchup based, but I need to see more. Quarterback's playing out of his mind. Offensive line is very good and healthy. They can run the ball in the snow. They can throw the ball 45 times in a dome if they need to do that. And their defense is overachieved. You're right. Would it surprise me if they're in a playoff game and the defense gets lit up? No, because they've had better defenses than this before. And then in a one-game playoff, that defense gets cooked. So I'm with you there. I'm not saying like I feel great about it and they're definitely going to get there, but there are things lining up for them that suggest maybe this is the year the Bills get over the hump with the rest. If this was this Bills team against like a previous version of the Chiefs, then I would still be going with the Chiefs, I think. But this version of the Chiefs, I can't do it. I've seen the Bills beat them, and if they're playing each other tomorrow on a neutral field, or you know what, maybe even an Arrowhead, I might still be tempted to pick the Bills.
Yeah, I've seen them get outplayed by Bryce Young, Aiden O'Connell, and Bo Nix in the last month. Like the benefit of you waste the benefit of the doubt when
that's
that
not
happens.
Exaggeration. Yeah, they really have.
But here's my pitch for the Ravens. So let me ask this: just offense, Buffalo or Baltimore? Which one are you taking?
Honestly, you could genuinely flip a coin, and I think I'd be okay with either.
I think that's a fair answer. Okay,
I think I would say Bills. The numbers would say Ravens. If you're just asking me my feel, and no one has a worse gut than me. The gut's always wrong. I'm telling you right now. But my gut says, who would I trust more? I think I would trust the Bills right now. That could be a recency bias, but that's how I feel.
I'm leaning Bills as well, Sheil, but this is truly a coin flip for me.
I mean, you just saw them like playing in the snow, like literally playing in the snow. Like Josh Allen took a pitch off of a pass and scored a touchdown off of it.
Passed and scored a touchdown.
So I think there is a little bit of recency bias.
Probably.
I think the numbers definitely point in Baltimore's favor. Okay, now the other side of the ball. Defense. Which one are you taking? I'm taking Baltimore. Like since week 9, they are 9th in EPA. They are 3rd in yards per play allowed. They are 4th in first down percentage allowed. They are 8th in success rate. Like They've kind of figured things out outside of the coverage busts and the penalties. Diante said it earlier. They definitely have the higher ceiling. I mean, I think you can make the argument that the Ravens are the sure thing on both sides of the ball. And I'm willing to concede it's a 50-50 proposition on offense, but it's not on defense.
No,
I
you
will
could say
say
it is, though. I mean, on defense for the season, the Bills have had the better defense this season.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean,
say,
in January, who are you trusting more? I think it's not a question.
Right, one game sample again, and you know what, Steven, I like that you did this, kind of walk me back off of my ledge a little bit, because I do think the margins are maybe a little bit tighter between Buffalo's A game and Baltimore's A game. I would say definitely, since they took Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson off the field, this defense has like magically looked a lot more viable.
It's really been in. It's kind of wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was with Roquan Smith suffering a hamstring injury and basically being limited, if not just missing games outright, over some of that span of time as well. I do think that maybe the margins are tighter than they would have been maybe a month or so ago. So I'll give Buffalo the edge on offense and Baltimore the edge on defense if we're talking about ceilings right now. And I guess you probably could flip a coin. I just think right now, if Buffalo's playing at home, I don't know how you're beating that team in a home environment in the playoffs with the way they're playing right now.
Bring it back around. The key question: Tyler Bass or Justin Tucker? It comes
that's not even a conversation. Not even a conversation.
Call me. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I'm naive. I'm taking Justin Tucker. Still taking Justin Tucker.
You're like Harbaugh. You still believe in him.
And Romo. Romo was like, yeah, he saw. I think Harbaugh came over and gave Justin Tucker a hug, and then Romo was like, oh, it's fixed. He's going to make a game-winning field goal if he get the chance.
Yeah, Romo did love that. All right, last note on this Bills-Niners game. Christian McCaffrey, Kyle Shanahan says, suffered a potential season-ending PCL injury. So he comes back, has had a rough season, had the Achilles, and now it looks like he could be done for the season. 49ers lose this game. It was in the snow, weird conditions in Buffalo. They're 2 back still in the NFC West with 5 to play. Seahawks are 7-5. Cardinals and Rams are 6-6. 49ers are 5-6. Remaining schedule: Bears, Rams, at Dolphins, Lions, at Cardinals. So 5 games left, 2 division games. Ruiz, last time we did this exercise, you and I said they're not quite dead yet. Have you changed your mind after the McCaffrey news and after this loss? Or are you saying probably dead, but not definitely dead?
No, they're dead. They're dead. This was it. And it wasn't like that they lost. Like I said this earlier in the week, like they had this game. They could lose this game. It was the manner in which they lost. And the CMC injury is the biggest part of that. I mean, he looked good before getting hurt in this game.
He really did. The best attempts all season, right?
Yeah, 7 attempts, 53 yards. It's 7.6 yards per carry, 5.86 yards per carry after contact. Like that's the Christian McCaffrey we wanted to see. We wanted to see the explosive runs. We wanted to see the broken tackles. It happens. Maybe the snow assisted that. Like there was bad footing. Players were kind of running gingerly. So I don't know if that would have translated to a more normal environment, but it was the McCaffrey we wanted to see, and we're not going to see that version of it. I mean, I don't know. It seems like he's going to be out for an extended period of time. If he isn't and he comes back and he looks like he did on Sunday night outside of the snow, then maybe they are alive. But right now, with all the information provided, like I don't know how you could believe that this team has a chance other than like what you saw last year influencing it.
The offense hasn't looked good since the Buccaneers game. It's been bad 3 weeks in a row, and that was with Christian McCaffrey being back. And with his absence, I just don't know how they generate the offense that they need, especially in the drop-back passing game, to just keep pace with the team like the Rams or the Lions or the Cardinals later on in the year. I just don't see it. They were already kind of back to needing to be a perfect team, basically the rest of the way. And you just look at what this defense has been like the last 2 weeks on the road. I mean, teams are just absolutely dominating them up front, moving the ball at will in the ground game. They're not getting the pressure that they need to without Nick Bosa. I mean, there's just so many things that have gone sideways for this team. And I don't want to position this as though it's heartbreaking. This is just what happens when a team gets hurt, right? I think that they've just run out of horses. I think that it's particularly frustrating because of all the 1-score games that they've lost, especially early in the year. They kind of missed out on an opportunity to bank some wins that they should have had, and I think that that's put them in a rough spot. And maybe that's why, I know that you guys and a lot of people have kind of hung on to the 49ers because the argument was always there that a top 10 offense in a league average defense should be better than the record reflects. But now I just don't see a defense that can hold its position around league average anymore with the way they're playing. And if they don't have two of their best horses between Brandon Ayuk, who got hurt over a month ago, and now Christian McCaffrey being back out of the lineup, I just don't know how they move the ball well enough to win games.
All right, I'm going to say probably dead, but not definitely dead. Listen, I got to give up on the Bengals
Sheil.
tonight, so I need a replacement. I have trouble committing.
Are you doing that? Cincinnati's done finally.
Yeah, you'll hear about that. You'll hear about that later in the show. Yeah, the Bengals are officially done. I need a replacement. I fear a commitment generally, but then when I do commit, I fear of letting go. So it's just the more we do the show, the more you learn about some of the issues that I have. And listen, they're 2 games back. It's probably not going to happen. But I look at the rest of those NFC West teams, and we're going to get to some of them here in a minute. No one's running away with this thing. You win a game, you beat the Bears next week if they don't get the new coach bump. And maybe, we're talking about them being 1 game back. Who knows? We'll see. All right, let's take a break. We come back. We're playing a little game. If you listened last week, you know what the game is, but we've got 3 new teams to talk about. We'll do that in a minute. All right, we are back on the Ringer NFL show. Here's the game. It is called Cooked Contender. Play off pretender. Say it with me. No, I'm not going to make everyone chant. It's okay if you're at home and you want to.
Did you make your family do the chant at Thanksgiving? Did you work out the chant?
It is fun to say. I'm telling you.
It is very rhythmic. I did enjoy that.
Yeah. See, that was pretty good. That was my shining moment for the season there. The idea is simple. We are focusing on 3 teams that we watched today, and we're going to talk about what do we think of them after what we saw. Cooked means it's over. See you next year. Not happening, not making the playoffs. Contender means you could see you maybe playing on championship weekend. Playoff pretender means you're somewhere in between. You still have a shot to get into the tournament, but we're not taking you that seriously. When we talk about Super Bowl contenders, you are not getting mentioned. All right. The first team on this list, we go to Atlanta. The Atlanta Falcons lose to the Los Angeles Chargers 17-13. Kirk Cousins throws 4 interceptions. They are now 6-6. They have lost 3 in a row. Steven Ruiz, we start with you. What do you got? Cooked, contender, or playoff pretender?
Oh, they're cooked. They're cooked. Kirk Cousins is cooked. This whole Kirk Cousins experiment is cooked. No, I don't want to rule that out because I think he could come back from the injury next year and be a little bit better. But right now, the guy can't move. And you watch them try to play offense with a quarterback that can't move in 2024, and the results are what you would expect. And the results are getting worse of late. Over the last 3 weeks, only 2 quarterbacks have a worse EPA average than him, Cooper Rush and Aaron Rodgers. And those are not 2 guys you want to be compared to right now. He's thrown 0 touchdowns and 6 interceptions over the last 3 games. On the season, he's only attempted 20 passes outside of the pocket. The next closest starter, full-time starter, is Tua, who missed a month with the concussion. He has 38, almost doubled him up. This guy's not moving. They're not calling play action. They're not calling the offense that we're used to seeing Kirk Cousins operate, where he's doing the boot action. He's rolling to his left or rolling to his right and making throws downfield. He's not doing any of that. And just like the hot potato aspect of his game, which has always been a feature of his game where he just wants to get rid of the ball before taking a hit, I feel like it's gotten worse now that he's coming off this injury. And you saw it in this game. He threw 4 interceptions. He could have thrown more interceptions. He was just panicking at some points, just throwing into traffic so he didn't take a hit. And I don't know which interception was the worst of the 4. My favorite happened to be the running one into the end zone where he just floated it up into a DB meeting room and it was picked off. But all the other ones were just as bad and just as egregious. And Raheem Morris, after the game, was asked, are you going to think about moving on from him and starting Michael Penix? He said no. He said the reason why we brought Kirk in was to be in position to make the playoffs, and we're in position to make the playoffs. But you didn't bring Kirk in to have the 13th best offense in the NFL. And I don't know what making the playoffs and having the 13th best offense in the NFL accomplishes going forward. You have this first-round pick on your roster. He is presumably the future of the team, the present of the team. isn't playing well. He's playing bad, and he's actively holding you back from making the playoffs. They could have padded this lead in the NFC South. The NFC South is not playing well as a whole, but they lose 3 games in a row, 3 winnable games in a row. One of them at home to this Chargers team that was trying to give the game away. And right now, like, maybe they make the wild card, but I think if they do, they get blown out and embarrassed. They would almost be better off letting the Bucs take that L for them.
Yeah, you look at the standings right now. They are tied with the Bucs for first place at 6-6. So it very well could be a situation where one of them wins the division and the other one doesn't get in. Because you look at teams like the Commanders, the Packers, the Vikings. They all have 8, 9, 10 wins. So that is how this thing certainly could play out. Diante, someone's got to win the NFC South, though. I guess on the flip side of this, are you where Ruiz is with this Falcons team?
Because they swept the Bucs games and have that lead on them, I think by definition, I can't yet say that they're cooked. So I'll say pretender. But spiritually, this team is cooked because you already know how they're going to lose a playoff game. I do have a little trivia question for you guys. Kirk Cousins was pressured on just 5 dropbacks today. Do you know how many of those plays generated positive EPA? I'll let you take a guess.
0.
0 is the answer. 0. Not a single play, not one of the 5 plays in which he was pressured generated positive EPA. I think that, and I was kind of buzzing in and out of this game because there was a lot happening around the second half while this game was still within contesting distance for the Falcons to take the lead. And you just saw so many key plays where Kirk Cousins is just standing totally statuesque in the pocket, doesn't give himself an opportunity to find any other receiving options because he won't move. And before a guy even gets in the range to lay a finger on him, he's just flinging the ball a lot of times in a double or triple coverage. So the 4 interceptions, if you just watch the highlights, that was an accurate picture of what the game was like, basically from the first quarter on. It was very, I haven't really seen him play with the ball that loosely since he was in Washington. And that was like at the worst points of his career when he was still, terrified of pressure that he could not see in front of him, didn't always know where his blitz answers were. This is a guy that's seasoned, 36 years old, if I remember right. He's played in this style of offense his entire career. He should know it like the back of his hands. And to see him be so, I guess, just rendered useless by pressures and blitz looks that he's seen 100 times over. To me, there's no closer to being cooked as a team that technically has a division lead than the Falcons are right now. And that's without even talking about the fact that this defense is still one of the NFL's worst. And they played one of their better games this year.
Yeah, maybe the best game of the season.
Yeah. Exactly. And their quarterback cannot be relied upon in the second half to get them the one scoring possession that they needed in order to win this football game.
I feel like the call about him playing like he did in Washington early on is like, that's what it is. That's the version of Kirk Cousins we're seeing right now. And I know he's like known as a smart quarterback, but he's always been like an overthinker at quarterback. Like he's a guy where if he has to think too much, he makes like a dumber decision than what you would expect from a guy who does he seems to be a smart quarterback and understand the game. Like the best evidence is when they played Philadelphia, he was in Washington and he kneeled instead of spiking the ball. Yeah. Like that's classic Kirk Cousins making decision-making under fire. And now that he can't move, it's just gotten worse. And he's missing like easy reads in the offense. Like these are plays, like Diante said, that he's been executing his whole career. And even those plays he can't be counted on to execute them right now. So for me, like, I don't know if I would bench him just yet, but I definitely understand the calls for Penix. I would want to see him too if I was a Falcons fan. I don't want to see this for the rest of the year.
As a member of team content, I very much would like to see Penix in this offense because, like you mentioned, this isn't just one game. Now, if you look at the season, all right, they've been kind of mediocre, slightly above average offense. But to your point, it's trending in the wrong direction. And when it's trending in the wrong direction with a quarterback at this age who is coming off of an injury. Now, he was asked about it afterwards and was pretty adamant that I wish I could tell you that there was something wrong physically and that's why I looked that way. But no, I just had a bad game. But these were this was a very concerning game. I mean, the arm does not look good. The decision-making is bad. He doesn't want to get hit and he can't move. So what do you have? I mean, you have a run game. Like, I don't know. Like I'm trying to picture if Penix gets in there, it's not like this looked like a rookie making his first start in the NFL.
Yes.
These were atrocious interceptions that his job today was to not lose the game. Like Diante said, their defense did their job. Their defense allowed 10 first downs and 187 yards. Your job was to not lose the game. Don't throw that pick six. And he couldn't do that. And so if you're like a teammate of Kirk Cousins, if you're someone in that organization, I don't know what Penix has looked like in practice or anything like that, but I don't think it's like, you're being irrational or impulsive to call for, like, I think there's a rational aspect to moving to Michael Penix and seeing what he has here. So I'm going to say cooked. I started this exercise thinking playoff pretender, but I just wrote last week on theringer.com that the Bucs are winning the NFC South. So if I think that, then I just got to say cooked for the Atlanta Falcons because they paid Kirk Cousins a lot of money. He's a veteran. I think they'll stick with him probably longer than they should, but I do wonder at some point if they go to Michael Penix.
$180 million. Like, that's how much money they gave this guy. Mike Tyson has a more convincing performance in the last month than Kirk Cousins does. Like, he might as well be playing the sport from like an office chair that he could swivel around with. I have more mobility. I'm sitting in a chair right now. I have more mobility than Kirk Cousins does.
I have a bulky IT band, and no, I might not. He probably still has a little more mobility than I do. But the point,
not much though. Not much though.
All right, so I had cooked. What did everyone remind me? What did you have?
We're all cooked. This is unanimous.
Everyone cooked. They're done. See you, Falcons. See you next year, unless Michael Penix gets in there. There'll be a little juice to this stretch run of the NFL season if Penix gets in there.
God, they're playing the Vikings next week. Brian Flores versus a stationary target.
And revenge game for Kirk Cousins. Wow, a lot of juice to that one. All right, we'll take a break. We come back, talk about two more teams. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Cooked contender or playoff cooked contender or playoff pretender. Week 17. That's the over-under on when I don't screw this up during an episode of the Ringer NFL show. All right, the next team is the team that the Atlanta Falcons played. The Los Angeles Chargers come away with the victory in this game. Big victory for them. They're 8-4. They're in a great spot in the playoff picture. But this was not, shall we say, the most convincing win in the world. 10 first downs, 187 total yards in this game. But again, they come away with the win. I feel like I know I've shifted my opinion on the Chargers week to week. What do I think their ceiling is? That kind of thing. So I'm interested to hear what you guys say. Diante, let's start with you. Where are you with the Los Angeles Chargers after this performance?
If the AFC weren't as competitive as it was, and we spent a lot of time in the A block kind of talking about the top teams there, I might consider them being a contender, but I have to say that they're a pretender right now. When you just look at some of the issues that they have on offense with finding guys that are not named Ladd McConkey, they can move the chains for them. And how often Justin Herbert is put in positions where he has to have perfect accuracy after extending or shaking a guy off of him that gave him pressure, and then having to pin the ball on Will Dissly's shoulder pad or pin the ball on Josh Palmer's shoulder pads to move the chains. Today was another example of that. And I think that this offense had looked better in the weeks prior. I thought against the Bengals, they looked really sharp. And we reflected on that. I thought even in the Ravens game last Sunday night, for all of the issues that they had, especially in the second half, I thought that for the most part, they were able to move the ball when they needed to, especially early in the game when things were kind of operating on script for them. But in games like this, against the Falcons defense that's pretty hapless, you should be able to move the ball, at will. So to only come out of that game with 10 first downs, to struggle on third down the way they did, I think Ladd McConkey was the only receiver with more than 2 receptions today, and he had like 117 yards, if I remember right. And even in that, a lot of that is dink and dunks, these quick in-breaking routes or stopping right at the sticks. This offense isn't going to have the answers it needs to beat a Ravens team, to beat the Bills, to beat the Chiefs in a playoff environment. I don't trust them enough to do so, but I do think that this is a team that can make it interesting against anybody just because of what this defense can do and what Justin Herbert looks like when everything is dialed in around him.
Yeah, that's what I have, Ruiz. I have them as pretender with an asterisk because this wasn't pretty. Obviously, this was not, their best game, but on the season, they entered the week 8th in DVOA. They've played the Ravens and were competitive. They've played the Chiefs and they were competitive. So if I'm just like one of these teams looking at which wild card teams I could face, and you have Jim Harbaugh coming to your building, who's coached in a lot of big games, and you have a quarterback in Justin Herbert, again, I don't want to say they're a year ahead of schedule, but like this isn't supposed to be the year where they're actually contending. But if you told me they were a little bit of a disruptor in the AFC, and maybe I'll change my mind by the time we get to that wild card weekend, but I would believe you there. Where are you with this Chargers team?
I'm going to call them a contender just based on where they're positioned and how the bracket might work out. Like if the playoffs started today, they would get a Houston team that I have no confidence in whatsoever. I think they would beat that Houston team. And if they won that game, they would get the Chiefs in the next game. And we've already seen them play the Chiefs tough with Justin Herbert nursing the high ankle sprain. The Chiefs have only gotten worse. The Chiefs
next week, I think, too.
They play in Arrowhead, which would be a preview of the possible playoff matchup. It would be in Kansas City. So maybe I should answer this in a week, but my overall sentiment about this team is the same as it was a week ago. And that's, they have the quarterback to go on a run. They don't have the offense to go on a run, and they don't have the offensive coordinator and Greg Roman to go on a run. Because I think, and so much of the season has been built around the idea of taking stuff off of Justin Herbert's plate and making things easy on him, not forcing him to be Superman like they have so many times in the past. But that's kind of happened by default because the running game hasn't been productive enough on a down-to-down basis. They're not ready to be the Lions right now. You have to build up that offensive line to become the Lions. You have to get a running back or a couple of running backs in there that can create those explosive runs that they're getting like once or twice a game, and that kind of boosts their rushing numbers. We've joked about that all year, but like down to down, this running game is putting Justin Herbert behind the eight ball more often than not. And the offensive line and the pass catchers aren't good enough for him to be able to drag them on his back out of those situations. And I think we're seeing that. And I think in the playoffs, eventually it's gonna send them home. And I mean, the defense, I still trust the defense. I thought they played relatively well against the Ravens a couple weeks ago on Monday Night Football, but that just showed you that there is a floor to what they can be. Even if they are top 5 defense at the end of the year, the best offenses in the NFL are going to be able to exploit you in some ways.
Yeah, in week 13, they had the second worst success rate of any offense. Only the Titans were worst. Second worst EPA per drive of any offense, ahead of only the Jets. I mean, 10 first downs, 187 total yards, and you win the football game. That is pretty uncommon. So again, and 5 sacks. How do you take 5 sacks against the worst pass rush in the NFL? So they are a flawed team, but they have some interesting little pieces. Even the defensive scheming in like a 1-game playoff, that would be pretty interesting to me against some of these other AFC teams. All right, so Ruiz is saying contender. I like that, going out on a limb. Diante and I are saying pretender, although Ruiz, I like your case. I mean, if you feel good about them beating the Texans, and then, who knows, in 1 game, you're 1 game away from the AFC Championship. And like I said, they are in excellent shape here in the AFC playoffs. All right, last team to get to here is the Arizona Cardinals. If any team wishes they could just kind of have their game back from week 13, it might be the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah. They're up 19-6 in Minnesota with 4 minutes left in the third quarter, and then things fall apart for them. They end up losing to the Vikings. They are now 6-6. Tied for second place in the NFC West. They could have kept pace there with the Seattle Seahawks with a win in that game and been 7-5, but now it's all bunched up there in the NFC West. Ruiz, we'll start with you here. The Arizona Cardinals, cooked, contender, or playoff pretender?
I'm going to go playoff pretender. I thought they gave this game away, not just with like blowing that lead, but Jonathan Gannon, which is just cowardly decision-making there at the end. You heard Greg Olsen kind of railing against it. Greg Olsen has dealt with that mistake more times than not in Carolina. Ron Rivera was a very big fan of kicking when you're up 3 to extend the lead to 6 instead of just putting the game away or trying to put the game away. The Cardinals were 4 yards away from having a 10-point lead late in this game. Jonathan Gannon said, I wanted them to have to score a touchdown to win, so he kicked the field goal. The Vikings went down, scored a touchdown, and won the game. Do you know what's better than forcing the opponent to score 1 touchdown to win? Forcing them to score twice to win would have been a lot better. And forcing them to drive from the 4-yard line, drive like 60, 70 yards to get into field goal range. That's another element that I think Jonathan Gannon overlooked. Like the numbers were very adamant. Like you should go for it in that situation. Try to put the game away because you incentivize the other team to go for the win rather than trying to extend the game, put it into overtime. You're more likely to lose in regulation. And he failed that very easy test. And it's not the first time he's failed that test this year. They've had other instances this year where they've kicked a field goal instead of going for the touchdown in a similar spot. Just last week against Seattle, beginning of the fourth quarter, 4-yard line, 4th and goal again. They're down by 10. Instead of trying to cut into that lead, they take the field goal to get within 7. Seattle comes right back down and answers with the field goal, and they lose the game. The game's over. Like, you can't do that. The margins are too thin in this division, in this playoff race. And for you as the Arizona Cardinals, you can't be affording to give away points and giving away games. And they've done it a couple times this year. And honestly, they've been lucky that the record isn't worse because some of these wins have been on the back of miraculous 4th down conversions.
Yeah. No, it's well said. It's an interesting analytics thing to what Ruiz was saying there, that going from 3 to 6 is actually bad. And some coaches are like, all right, I understand. Others are not, because you go up by 6 and now the opposing offense has all 4 downs to go down the field, and they're forced to be aggressive because all that they know, we score a touchdown or we lose the game. Now, if you go for it and you get it, obviously you're probably going to win the game. Your win probability goes through the roof. Even if you don't get it, to Ruiz's point, the opponent is now thinking we're down by 3. We don't have all 4 downs. Let's get into field goal range and force overtime. So it's kind of like not total worst case scenario, but worst case scenario is that they kick a field goal and you go to overtime and you still have a 50% chance to win it. And it was, first of all, Greg Olsen, like announcer moment of the year, it reminded me of how far like analytic stuff has come, because he was explaining that in real time during the broadcast in a very clear and concise way. So everybody knows Greg Olsen is awesome, but I thought he had like a fantastic moment for the nerds here today explaining that. And I also like that it played out exactly how he described, because sometimes they describe it and then it doesn't work out and everyone says analytics is ruining football. So that didn't happen here. The Vikings are driving the football. They have a 4th and 5, I think it was, from the Arizona 33. So if they're down by 3, they are kicking the field goal there, and you're going to overtime. They go for it. Darnold gets it, and then they score a touchdown. So
you're going to overtime at worst. There was 2 minutes left in the game. If they kick the field goal there, you give Kyler Murray the ball back with a chance to go for it.
Right. Well, and you know what the worst part of it to me is that their play call on 3rd and goal is the exact kind of play call you want if you're going to take a chance on 4th down.
Yes.
They go with the tunnel screen. You get a bunch of yards with Trey McBride. You're inside the 5-yard line now, which now means that Kyler Murray's legs is a viable way for you to get in the end zone. Even if it's not a design run, just him extending can give you a chance to get the ball in the end zone. We saw that in the New England Indianapolis game with Anthony Richardson, and they're trusting his legs to extend when they needed to in a goal line situation. But to take the field goal there, to your guys' point, that's always my biggest point of contention with these decisions, is just play out what happens if you don't get it. You don't have to give me whether or not you think you'll convert. If you don't get it, this is approaching the 2-minute warning now because the clock is rolling after a completed pass. You take a chance at the end zone. If not, you've basically got the 2-minute warning, and now you still have control over the game because, to your point, Sheil, teams are now incentivized to play for the tie instead of play for the win because nobody likes losing in regulation.
They had 3 timeouts too.
Exactly. There is nothing to be gained there by going up 6. And I think that for me, like that I love that the conservatism is punished right off the bat for this team, and I think that this speaks to Kevin O'Connell and how well he managed the end of game situation. You look up and it's like, oh, chunk play. And then you get that high variance 4th down conversion that you need in order to get the ball across the goal line later on in that drive. So to me, I just don't understand why Jonathan Gannon, knowing that the opportunity is there to get a commanding lead over the division, even though all these teams are clustered together, they have tiebreakers over a lot of their competition. This is an opportunity, I think, to really be aggressive there and to not do so and leave the window open for a team like the Rams, for a team like the Seahawks. It may ultimately cost them an opportunity to make the postseason this year.
Yeah, and they don't really have a margin for error in their wild card race. Now they're 2 games back or 1.5, and they lost to Washington, who has the last place. So they don't even have the tiebreaker there. Washington's 8-5, Arizona's 6-6. But this was like one of 3 instances where Gannon went against the numbers to bring the punt team or the kicking team out and pass up an opportunity to go for it. And It's a shame that we're talking about this because the rest of the game was kind of like a proof of concept for this coaching staff and how good of a job they've done. Like I thought the offensive plan was good, mitigating that Brian Flores stuff on early down, staying out of third and obvious passing situations. When the Vikings were able to blitz with those all-out zero blitzes, they had a plan for it. They beat it several times with like quick outbreaking routes. The defensive plan I thought was really good. It was the first time we really seen that Vikings offense be neutered for like the first 3.5 quarters of the game. They had a plan for Jefferson. I thought they really manipulated that pass protection plan for Minnesota. They were getting free rushers all day long. They were forcing Sam Darnold into bad throws, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast. It was a good performance for this coaching staff until those fourth downs, and it's been an area of weakness for Gannon for the last 2 years, and I hope that he figures it out because I do think this coaching staff is doing a good job and it has this team going in the right direction. Yeah, it's also a fun team to watch. Like I want to see this team in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, they had the 4th and 2 from the Minnesota 13 on I think their first possession of the game. It feels like as an objective observer, I'm watching Kyler Murray saying they're moving the football all day long. Like trust him to make some of these plays. Even they have like a 3rd and 6 sometimes, and I know like this is in vogue in some teams that run the ball well, but like. Sometimes they take the ball out of his hands and then they kick after that. Like, I don't mind if you're going to run it, but then your plan is to go for it. But I'm like, man, if I had a 3rd down in that situation, given how well he's playing, I would want to keep the ball in his hands. They go for 1 for 6 in the red zone. Like the final score here was 23-22, but they were moving the football all game long. They had 406 yards of offense in this game. They didn't get it done on the last drive. They had a bad last drive when they had a chance to kind of drive for a field goal there. But yeah, I feel like they should understand that their defense is outperforming its talent, but it's probably only going to last so long. And, Darnold did make the plays at the end. Like you said, they weren't doing Vikings offense couldn't do anything. And then all of a sudden they're late in the game, they're completing passes all over the field and they get the victory. So wasted opportunity for the Cardinals. I think I'm going to be a cooked on the Cardinals. Maybe it'll come back to beat me. I don't think they're winning the NFC West. I think their defense has outperformed its talent, but I just feel like the lack of talent there in these big games down the stretch, I don't know that that's something that they're going to be able to overcome. I could be wrong. They're 1 game out of first place, so that could be completely wrong here in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is. But you know what? That's why we play the game every week. Diante, what did you have for them? Cooked, contender, or playoff pretender?
I'll just say playoff pretender right now. They needed this game. I think they needed this game just to position themselves best. We kind of went over all the reasons. And now you've put yourself in a position where next week's game against the Seahawks may be, for the balance of your season. If you get swept by the Seahawks now are in the driver's seat to ride out the rest of the way and win this division, which is not where the Cardinals want to be. This game would have just gone a long way towards kind of easing some tensions going down the rest of the season, because even against New England and Carolina, these are 2 teams that have shown signs of life in ways that didn't exist for them a month or so ago. You don't want to have to be playing your A game every week down the stretch if you don't have to. And I think that this week would have gone a long way towards kind of opening up possibilities for them to make the playoffs that aren't just winning the division.
There you go. All right. So that's the Arizona Cardinals. That's cooked, contender, playoff pretender, another rousing edition of America's favorite game. We'll probably come back and do it next week. For more, check us out on Ringer NFL on YouTube, or if you're listening, check us out on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. If you are listening right now, don't go anywhere. We will be back in a minute to hand out some awards. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Awards, superlatives, the final segment of the Sunday night show where we get stuff that we haven't gotten to yet and hand out some of this. So, Diante, start us off. What do you have for your first award?
I'm giving the It Ain't My Fault award to Aaron Rodgers for his post-game comments after this loss to the Seattle Seahawks. I don't know if you saw.
I missed it. I'm excited.
So one of my favorite kind of like shirking of responsibility quotes is when athletes get into like explaining very mundane details of the game. So Aaron Rodgers says, there are 11 guys on the field. Thank you for the clarity, Mr. Rodgers. Wasn't sure if anybody had picked that up yet. And then after, kind of rambling a bit, he says, sometimes it's my fault. And that's something that I do all the time in the house. I'm sure that anybody who has, has a significant other, has some kids, you kind of give the veil of accountability by saying, hey, man, sometimes I screw it up. But, sometimes there are other details that are that are going wrong in other spots, too. So I love that. He said the wind was inconsistent. He had an opportunity to hit Garrett Wilson in the end zone when he was wide open, like butt naked open, missed him. He said the wind was inconsistent. I think that that's a very funny quote coming from the guy who spent 90% of his career in Lambeau. I'm not sure if that one really connects with me. So, yeah, I just think that for Aaron Rodgers and Leonard Williams kind of pointed that out, too. He was like, hey, man, that's an old guy. Doesn't really like getting hit. You can kind of see when he feels like he's about to take some contact. You get a little bit of chuck and duck. So, Mike McDonald dialed up a few pressures that we knew would get close enough to where even if we didn't deliver a sack, the pressure would give us an opportunity to get hands on the ball. And one of those resulted in a Leonard Williams 91-yard pick six. And as I was watching that play, I just kind of had the thought, I've been watching him since he was at USC. It's like, man, I wonder when the last time is that Leonard Williams sprinted 90 yards for something that wasn't a conditioning test. But he was moving. Yeah. I'll give the old guy his credit.
He didn't slow down. Moving. Yeah, I agree. For a defensive lineman to run that, he was that was an impressive athletic feat by Leonard Williams.
It wasn't even like
playing out of his mind, by the way.
Yeah, it wasn't your typical defensive lineman interception either. He kind of dropped into a zone, like a hook zone almost, and cut off the play.
Yeah, got underneath the route.
Yeah, but he also had 2 sacks, like you said. He had a tackle for loss in the run game, and then he had that comment, which is the highlight of his day. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers blaming it on the inconsistent wind, his inaccuracy, just hilarious because, first of all, Aaron Rodgers, 25% of his throws were off target, according to True Media. The worst in the NFL this week, worse than Will Levis this week. But Geno, who played in the same wind, was 6th best in terms of off target. He only missed 6% of his throws, according to True Media charting. So, yeah, the excuse doesn't fly. Sorry.
3-9, the New York Jets. It only gets worse week by week for the Jets. All right, Ruiz, what do you got?
I'm going to give You Had One Job award to Bengals cornerback Josh Newton, who was, I think, the man responsible for containing Justin Fields' game-clinching zone read keeper at the end of that game. I mean, why Justin Fields is on the field. They brought him on multiple times over the last couple of weeks to run this zone read in short yardage situations. The Bengals needed one stop to get the ball back to give Joe Burrow a chance. Fields does the zone read. He pulls it. There's no one to contain, and he gets an easy first down. I just don't know how you give that up. I'm sure Big Lou, we needed him on a different team. This roster that they have been working with, it's not your fault, Big Lou. I know everyone's blaming you and everyone's
Jesse Bates merchant. Some listeners are saying. I'm just saying. Listen, that sounds deep. Like something you might say, but not for Big Lou. Someone did tweet it. Whoever tweeted that at me, sorry, I forget who it was. But yeah, they said Jesse Bates merchant ?
But everyone's blaming the Bengals defense after this loss. Hey, the Bengals offense gave up a couple touchdowns in this game. They turned the ball over a bunch. The Bengals scored a defensive touchdown. I don't think we can lay this all on the feet of Big Lou, but we can lay it on Josh Newton for that botched run fit there.
All right. I have 2 from this game. I need to say my piece on the Bengals. Best season for a quarterback who's not going to the playoffs goes to Joe Burrow. Yes, he did.
One of the best ever.
Had a turnover, but you look at him this season, 3rd in dropback success rate, 6th in EPA per pass play, 30 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. They lose to the Steelers 44-38 to drop to 4-8. They needed a defense this season that was 21st.
20th,
20th, something not great. Just keep on. And they've had some bad luck. It hasn't just been that, but it's just you go through the offenses that are in the same category as the Bengals this season, and either every team is in the playoffs or they're one game out of the play. No one's season is over except for the Bengals among the top 8 offenses in the NFL. So if you're a Bengals fan, this is such a bummer because you wasted a season for a great quarterback who was in his prime and most importantly stayed healthy. You got a healthy, all the wrist stuff at the beginning of the season, and he was able to stay healthy. And now T. Higgins is probably going to be gone in the offseason. Yep. And you don't necessarily trust your front. You got to rebuild the defense and also make sure you're good with pass catching options and make sure that the offensive line that's got some older guys on the interior is buttoned up. Like, are they up for this? What do the next 3 years look like for the Cincinnati Bengals? So I think Joe Burrow's been awesome this season, and he will not be in the playoffs. I finally have to give up on the Bengals at 4-8.
On the other hand, don't get outplayed by Russell Wilson and you win the game. Simple as that.
Well, yeah, if Joe Burrow was going up against his own offense, he might have thrown for 700 yards today.
Russell Wilson didn't turn the ball over. Oh, well, he turned it over once, but
oh my gosh, unbelievable.
Okay, he gets credit for his defense carrying them to the Super Bowl, and then he also gets credit for his defense like blowing this season. Like just enough.
All right, that was the one time he's had a good defense, by the way. If you look at it statistically. Yeah. Every other one has been mediocre. You guys have built the myth of Captain Lou Anarumo, who was a Jesse Bates merchant. Then they let Jesse Bates walk, and the guy can't field the defense for an entire season.
You're accusing Big Lou of being the product of myth making?
Yes, I am.
Joe Burrow didn't become the quarterback you guys all wanted him to be until this year.
Okay, well, this year, best season for a quarterback who's not going to the playoffs. And then best performance, I have another one from this game. Best performance by a QB who previously went by the nickname Mr. Unlimited. I was going to say best QB performance by an old, but then I needed to go through all the box scores and make sure there wasn't an old guy. But Russell Wilson, I guess Lou's game plan was just he's not going to throw checkdowns. And Russell Wilson just took check down after check down after check down. Now, he did make some plays downfield, but his average pass went 5.1 yards. He was just dumping the ball off, and they were picking up huge chunks. He throws for 414 yards, throws a pick six on the first possession. Next 7 possessions, touchdown, 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 field goal, blocked field goal, and touchdown. So Steelers win this game. A Steelers offense that couldn't even score a touchdown in previous weeks just goes up and down the field against the Bengals and are now 9-3, up 2 in the loss column against the Baltimore Ravens. Had the highest success rate of any team today in the NFL. So Russell Wilson. Nice game for him.
I had a superlative for him too. I wasn't familiar with your game, or I was going to give him the old dog new trick award. This is from Theo Ash from Twitter. Career high for passing yards and throws to the middle of the field for Russell Wilson, which has always been a thing with him. He doesn't throw to the middle of the field. 261 yards on 22 attempts to the middle of the field.
Wow.
On Sunday. It's a new day for Russel Wilson. He's back. He is like top 10 in like a lot of passing metrics overall this season. Like I think he's 8th in success rate, or no, 18th in success rate, but he's top 10 in all the other metrics like yards per dropback, yards per attempt, EPA per dropback, and all that good stuff. So,
some of those are George Pickens stats. Some of those are George Pickens stats.
How does this end for the Steelers now? They're 9-3. Are they going to win the AFC North?
I think they're going to end up winning the division now. I'm struggling to see if Cincinnati beating them would have been the gateway for Baltimore to kind of sneak back in and steal this division. But I don't know if the Steelers are going to have the kind of lapses that I thought they would down the stretch that would allow them to kind of give away the division at this point.
They still have to go to Philadelphia, still have to go to Baltimore, and they still have to play Kansas City at home. They still have to play this Bengals team.
Yeah, they do have a tough stretch coming. I don't think the Cincinnati can beat them, and I do think that they'll beat Cleveland the next time they match up. And I think that may just be enough for them to kind of sneak out with this division. And I'm not going to act like the Chiefs. The Chiefs don't get the helmet win for me anymore. I've seen that team struggle against other competent teams. I've seen them struggle against teams that I thought were incompetent. I need to see the Chiefs beat a team like the Steelers before I believe that's the way that's going to go.
Yeah, I think that's true. You don't look at the Chiefs, and it doesn't matter the opponent. It's not like this team's definitely going to lose to the Chiefs. How can you think that way? Every game is a one-possession game for them this season. So Steelers' point differential on the season is better than the Ravens, which I think would probably surprise. Not by a lot, but
this is crazy talk from you guys. Let's bet. But let's put
all I said was
point
point differential. Listen. I might have been on some group chats telling some friends last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? When the Steelers were heavy favorites, I'm like, put a little lettuce on the Ravens if you want to open your FanDuel account because they're plus money. Let me see what it is right now. Right now, the Steelers are the favorites at minus 160. Ravens are plus 130. No, I think I would still be on the Ravens in this case.
I'm talking about the Kansas City game. I'm saying let's bet something right now that Kansas City is going to absolutely beat the Steelers in Week 17.
Oh, Week 17 is when they play. You want us to make a bet for Week 17 right now?
We'll revisit.
I might take some action on this.
So
what do you want to put on this?
Well, how many points are you giving us?
No points.
Straight up. What do you think? We're suckers?
It's at home, and you guys were just talking about how they could lose to Bryce Young and Bo Nix. Or was that me?
They can.
Yeah, anybody can. All right. Those are two of mine. All right, Diante, you're up next. What do you got?
This one, I guess, is probably a little bit more serious, somewhat serious, but really, I kind of just want to finger wag for this one. And it's an Adios Game Check Award for Azeez Al-Shaair for that ridiculous hit on Trevor Lawrence that obviously spurs the fight, spurs the ejection. A couple of Jags players get ejected. And I this is one of the things, if I'm going to kind of get on the pedestal as a defensive coach, like, it actually does bother me when we have the conversation of, well, what are guys supposed to do? I'm not saying that it's not difficult for a guy who's 6'6" sliding, and quarterbacks have kind of mastered the art of stealing 2.5 extra yards on a slide. But what you can't do is lead with your forearm, and then you can't lose your mind and start tugging guys to the ground on the opposing sideline and then go chase down the starting guard on the opposite team on the opposite sideline after you're ejected, still looking for more problems. I know that D'Amico Ryans tried to kind of give cover to Azeez Al-Shaair after the game and say, hey, that's not the way that we coach him, which I do believe. I don't think that any head coach in the NFL is teaching guys to do that to quarterbacks, because you wouldn't want that done to your own. And I know that D'Amico Ryans has a lot of respect for this game. But if you just look at the history just this year, we've got a punch thrown after a play on the opposing sideline from Azeez Al-Shaair. We've got late hits out of bounds from the same guy. I like him as a player, but if this is the pattern of behavior, I do have some concerns about whether or not this is being enabled if it continues to happen this way. And this obviously was a flashpoint moment. So I'm hoping that he maybe not only loses a game check, but has to miss a game for everything that was incited after the hit. And ultimately, man, like, that's not football, and we got to get it out of our game.
Yeah, I have one for D'Amico Ryans. We're trying to pull that's not representative of who he is as a player or who we are as a team. When you guys are second in the league in penalties, you are second in the league in unnecessary roughness penalties, to be specific. And, like, I don't think D'Amico Ryans is coaching his players to play like that, but a part of their system is playing aggressively, playing downhill,
recklessly,
hitting hard, playing fast.
It's
like,
reckless.
There is a fine line. And when you put a dirty player, and I think Al-Shaair deserves that label at this point. Like Diante said, he punched a running back who was just standing there. It wasn't like Rashawn Johnson was instigating a fight. The guy was just standing there. He got punched in the face, and even after, he's like, what did I do? I'm just standing here on the sideline, on my own sideline, by the way. And then just last week, as Diante referred to, he hits Tony Pollard going out of bounds and gets an unnecessary roughness flag just last week. So
it wasn't like a bang bang play. Like, Tony Pollard was a good yard and a half.
Yeah. It was clear that he was out of bounds. I don't know. Like, this is representative of who this player is, and it is kind of representative of who this defense has been, and it's held them back. Like, I forget the moral grandstanding. I think from a football perspective, the lack of discipline has hurt this team, and not just with the penalties. Like, we've seen offenses take advantage of their over aggression in recent weeks. So I do think this is a problem going forward. But I also wanted to point out, like, Gerald Moose Johnson, who was calling the game, I do agree with what he was saying about Al-Shaair and his lack of respect for the game, but then he tried to connect it to, like, the fights over the flag planting in college football and saying, like, there's a lack of respect in football now, and that's why you're getting these dirty hits and these fights. Man,
a little bit of a reach.
I grew up in the jacked up era. We used to have dedicated segments to guys getting concussive hits in the NFL. Like, the game is cleaner than it's ever been. I totally disagree with that notion. I don't think it has anything to do with some lack of respect in the game. The game was way more disrespectful back in the day compared to now.
Yeah, I think those are two different things. One, a hit like that within the action of the game, and then, like, the flag planting stuff is very different.
Stretch. A little bit of a stretch.
You guys said it well on Al-Shaair. I mean, if it's a one-time thing, I always sort of have some empathy when there's, like, a one-time thing for a defensive player and then they're getting labeled dirty, and it's like, well, they don't have a pattern of behavior. But if they have a pattern of behavior, then I think it's fair to assess it the way you guys did just there. All right, I'm going to move to a lighter note on mine. Okay, best tweet to inspire a sports movie. Okay. This came from Adam Schefter this weekend, who tweeted, Saints interim head coach Darren Rizzi has specialized on special teams and his work has continued. During Rizzi's first 2 games as the Saints interim head coach, opposing kickers Younghoe Koo and Dustin Hopkins were a combined 1 for 6 on field goal attempts. The only made field goal the past 2 weeks against Rizzi's Saints was a 27-yarder from Koo in Week 10. But the Saints have been helped with field goal misses from 51 yards, 27 yards, 53 yards, 35 yards, and 46 yards. I mean, this has potential. A coach is getting. If a coach was granted some type of superpower where he could make the opposing kicker miss whenever he wanted, I had so many questions. This was one of the great thought exercises of my NFL Sunday. I'm like, if that coach sucked at everything else, but he could make that opposing kicker miss every single field goal, Diante, I mean, that's pretty valuable. How valuable is that?
You would know better than me. If this was like the late 80s to early 90s, we would already have a film in production about this interim head coach in New Orleans who was borrowing from maybe some of the voodoo culture that exists, some of the Afro-Caribbean voodoo culture that exists in New Orleans.
It'd be a problematic
a little bit.
Movie,
Absolutely. I think that would already be in production. I can see the Paramount Pictures or the 21st Century Fox or 20th Century Fox logo going over before that film comes on. I do think, though, if we're going to take a little bit of a serious tilt at this, I have been impressed by New Orleans' dedication to playing hard since making this coaching change. And shoot, I mean, if we're going to joke about it, if we're talking about the value of this, if I'm Justin Tucker, I want to go to Darren Rizzi and say, hey, man, can you gin some of this up in the opposite direction for me? Well, what is it going to take? I'll come play for the Saints on a 1-year deal after my time in Baltimore is up. If that's the exchange I got to make to knock down field goals and maybe reverse some of whatever jinx it is that I have.
I love that. Diante thought for a second about having a serious Saints take. But then he's like, oh, no, we're going back to this, and then just making fun of the Justin Tucker of it all. So, yeah, Saints lose 21-14 to the Rams. I don't know if the Rams missed any field goals today. But, again, that would be quite the superpower for a coach there. All right, Ruiz, what do you got?
All right, my last one goes to Geno Smith for the Master of the Revenge Game award. He is 5-1 against his former team. This stat comes from Dante Koplowitz-Fleming, an NFL media researcher. That's the best record by any quarterback since the merger, minimum 5 starts. 5-1, he beat the Jets today. It wasn't the best game for Geno, but he made the plays that he had to make, and he was able to overcome the inconsistent win that took out Aaron Rodgers.
It's smart.
I think it maybe helps when the Jets and Giants are your former teams.
I was going to say, we've been the 2 worst teams of the last 10 years. So are there any other former Jets or Giants who could potentially do this in the future? That's the question.
He also beat the Chargers, too. You're taking away some wins from him. The Chargers are a more competent team. And it was the Brandon Staley era. It was Justin Herbert was hurt. I think it was after the rib injury, but it still counts.
Yeah, over the last 10 I forget what year Geno came in, but over the last 10 years, Giants 30th in win percentage and the Jets 31st in win percentage. So he did a good job picking his
Okay.
His
you don't have to tear him down.
Hey, he's got the Seahawks in first place in the NFC West. There you go. All right, Diante, what do you got?
This
Anything
one we'll be brief with this one. The last one is just like potential quarterback of the NFL's future. I might be giving that to Drake May after watching him over the last month and just seeing the growth in his game. I think that Steven, you've talked about this. Our friend Derek Klassen at The Athletic has talked a lot about this. Nate Tice at Yahoo Sports has talked about this as well. He was the kind of quarterback that just needed to figure out what he can and can't get away with at the NFL level. And then you would start to see how all the physical traits can manifest themselves into winning football plays. On Sunday against Indianapolis, he goes 24 for 30 for 238 yards and a touchdown, runs for 59 yards. You've seen games where the scrambling has had a game-breaking effect on defenses. I think that his accuracy has improved week over week. How quickly he makes his decisions has improved week over week. And I think even when he's holding the ball long, and I think that was part of the reason why he took 4 sacks today and another 4 last week against Miami. For the most part, the decisions he's making when he is holding the ball is about punishing defenses, right? It's not about just staring down looks or staring down a favorite receiver. I think that he is usually working through the progression the way that you would ask or expect your quarterback to, and trying to push the ball down the field wherever it's possible. And if I had to pick a guy out of this rookie class, I know that we've kind of had, a lot of different discussions about Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams and where they're going to stack up in the immediate future. When I just look at how a guy is managing the pocket right now, I don't know if any rookie quarterback is managing the pocket and making aggressive but sound decisions in the exact same way that Drake May is right now amongst our rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah, he has the most impressive quarterbacking tape of any of the rookies. Now, I think Caleb Williams still has the higher ceiling. I think he's a younger quarterback compared to Drake May. I think he has more room to grow, and I think he's had more put on his plate, even though Drake May hasn't been blessed with this great supporting cast. It's been the opposite of that. But I do think Caleb has been asked to do a little bit more before the snap and stuff like that. But in terms of, like Diante said, pocket management, throwing the football accurately, that was a big concern. I know there was a lot of talk about his footwork. That hasn't been a concern at all. I haven't seen any misses where I'm like, oh, that's bad footwork. That has not been the case. Usually when he misses, it's because the receiver is running the route at the wrong pace or running at the wrong depth. He's been very good outside of the construct of this shoddily built offense for the Patriots, I would say is fair to say about them. And I think he's not being asked to call all the shots before the snap, but he's definitely being asked to do more than say Jaden Daniels. And I think he's looked more impressive from that quarterback perspective. But these other two guys still have a chance to pass him, even by the end of this year. You look at the numbers, Jaden Daniels has put up better numbers than him, and he still has a chance to put up high-level tape against high-level opponents. He's going to be able to do it in the postseason, which May and obviously Caleb Williams won't be able to do.
It's working out nicely if you're a Patriots fan. You're going to get a top 5 pick. They keep losing, but the quarterback is legit. We've seen that now for over a month here. If the season ended today, the Patriots would pick 4th overall in the NFL draft. And you look at the other teams, I guess the Jaguars would be the exception. Jaguars would have the first overall pick if the season ended today. This is from Tankathon. Raiders would be 2nd, Giants 3rd, Patriots 4th, and Panthers 5th. Panthers fan, any Bryce Young thoughts, Ruiz, or should we save that for the midweek show?
No, yeah, I thought Bryce Young looked good again. 3 of his 4 best games have come in the last month by EPA. I think there's very encouraging signs. I don't think we've seen the signs that oh, this is the guy. We haven't seen that breakout performance, especially in a winning game yet. But he looks like a viable quarterback. He looks more like the quarterback we expected him to be coming out. I was low on Bryce Young before the draft. I would not have taken him with the first pick, but I did expect him to be a league average quarterback, like an Andy Dalton style, not style, but that level of a quarterback. And I think there's still a chance that can happen. Mind you, Carolina hasn't put a good supporting cast around him. I don't think we've seen the best of Bryce Young yet because he doesn't have the teammates to allow him to play like that. But the signs are encouraging. I think he's at least earned another shot unless he just totally dovetails over the last month of the season.
There you go. That's the nicest thing the Ruiz has said about the Carolina Panthers since we first started podcasting together.
Can you blame me? They've given me every reason in the world.
It's a nice milestone. I'm just saying, whoever's changing the signs there at the the Dilworth Bar. What is it? Dilworth Bar and Grill, the one where Tepper went in and flipped the guy's lid. Maybe give Ruiz a shout out. He just said nice things about.
With all that said, he averaged 6.5 yards per attempt today. It wasn't
I should have just signed off.
Everything in perspective.
I should have just signed off. It left it on a good note there, but it's all good. All right, that will do it for this episode of the Ringer NFL Show. Thank you to Diante Lee. Thank you to Stephen Ruiz, Christopher Sutton producing, additional production supervision by Conor Nevins, Arjuna Ramgopal, and Dan Comer. Appreciate T. Cruz for the video production. We will be back later this week. Everyone have a good week. We'll talk to you next time on the Ringer NFL Show.